Coming up today on Locked On Texas Tech, Grant McCasland is shopping for size and 0 hour is approaching. Also, we rummage through the Red Raider junk drawer, which includes Debbie McGuire making a stand for all that is good and decent. Next on Locked On Texas Tech.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We're going to start this thing off right. Raider! Everything runs through Lubbock.
Great to be with you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for making us your first listen on YouTube. Anywhere you get podcasts, Sirius XM app available now to you. Locked On Texas Tech, you'll find right there, SXM in the App Store. Check it out. He's the only Chris Level. I'm Casey Cowan. Apologies for the absence yesterday, but Cinco de Mayo Eve is huge within my culture, so took a little time away. Happy Cinco de Mayo to all who celebrate here today. Maybe a grito before the episode is over. And Chris, we know that some spending Cinco de Mayo and the weekend beyond here in the LBK and wanted to get started there. It's not, often that we would just dive into hey, visitors on campus, prospective athletes on campus, football or basketball. But with the way that this Texas Tech Hoops timeline has kind of oriented itself, it's made some of us a little bit more anxious. And by some, I mean me. Yes, I'm looking in a mirror here. But particularly when we're talking about big men, I think that even more so has got my attention, Chris. And I know that Grant McCasland and company are hosting some guys with some size here in West Texas this weekend. So that's where we wanted to begin. And I'm really just kind of curious first, big picture view, as we get to these guys that we'll talk about. I don't even know how long the list is of prospective big men that are out there to be shopped. So I'm wondering also, like, how urgent is it with some of these targets now that you really have some success? Because how many other options are out there? I know the list is getting, I guess, thinner by the day.
Yeah, I think is now we're, as you mentioned, Cinco de Mayo, and we're kind of like a 1 week into May, and we've talked about kind of early June being kind of really when you want to have everybody in place, or most people. Not that it has to be that way, but and the portal is being picked through a bit. There are, for example. I don't think Texas Tech really reached out to or recruited Tyler Perry very hard. I think that was obviously Coach McCasland's player at North Texas, but he ends up at Kansas State, so they get a big bump there. Then you have Hunter Dickinson, the Michigan transfer, kind of was a big storyline there, and whether he was going to go to Kentucky or wherever, but he ends up at Kansas, so you're going to see him.
Oh, terrific video, by the way, Hunter. Very cute. Just very cute. And by cute, I mean cringe as hell, to use an industry term.
Yeah, I would have thought he's like above something like that. I don't really know
Right.
I mean, there's an old saying, like, don't punch down, and it's like, he's bigger than that, man. Like, what are you doing? This silliness. Oh,
he's actually not.
Yeah, exactly. It's just, I guess not. And then really some news that in some ways affected Texas Tech, I think quite a bit, is that UTA, point guard Kendall Weaver was thought to be maybe going to visit here later this weekend or early next week.
Yep.
Commits to Texas. You have the UTEP transfer that you had kind of been in on. That, whether you kind of saw, okay, he's not going to come here, or whether you kind of changed your mind or whatever, he ends up committing to Texas. And so it's being picked through a bit. So, but you do have some size set to visit Lubbock, it looks like, over the weekend or even into early next week. And that is Warren Washington from Arizona State. And then I hope I'm saying his first name correctly, Kashad Johnson from San Diego State. This is a 4 and a 5 type position for both of these guys. I mean, Washington's a center. He's 6'11", 7 foot, 230. Johnson is he's a power forward, if you will. Both of these guys would be immediate starters, in my opinion. Both of these guys, obviously Johnson, played for a team that played for the national championship last year, averaged 7 points, 5 rebounds, just a really good role player, had some toughness, some beef, some experience.
Knows defense as a culture.
Exactly.
That's what I think.
and in Washington, and I can't say that Washington is any better than Bacho. That's what's tricky here, is that's why I just don't think they wanted to lose Bacho, and it's still a bit of a cloudy oddness that you did lose him. But, this is a guy that you desperately need in Warren Washington, basically just to replace Daniel Bacho. And I know that Washington's numbers are a bit better and he was a bit healthier than Bacho. But again, we're talking upside, and keep in mind, Washington has, I think both Washington and Johnson, your visitors, these are 1-year guys. So these are both guys that have played for 4 years. I think they've got a COVID year. I think I'm right on that. But yeah, Cowan, I mean, this could be your starting 4 and your 5. And I mean, and so let's do this. You just add, you finished 9th in the league last year, and your big men group was O'Banner, all conference type guy, second team all conference type guy, Robert Jennings, true freshman. Then you had Bacho and Fardaws. So those 4 guys. You're just hoping to get Robert Jennings, Johnson, and Washington. Okay, you're hoping for that.
Right.
That still doesn't, I don't think, equal, last year's group. Now, granted, you can't ignore the Bacho injury. You can't ignore the Fardaws injury and all that. Those factor in. Don't get me wrong, but amongst those 3, if you were to get the 2 this weekend, do you have an O'Banner that's like a leading scorer type amongst your bigs? I don't know if you see it. So I just, but again, maybe you're plus defensively. Maybe there's somebody else you can add to that group. I'm just kind of looking at it, comparing last year's team. But these are guys, I guess I would just say, you desperately need. You really have got to add these 2 guys, and I don't know what is on the list if you don't get them. And I'm sure that they may still even look to add more to this kind of length and big man group, if you will. But these 2 are the start.
That's really what I wonder is just, man, how many options are even left out there that would be an improvement or something at least consistent with what you had a season ago, which wasn't good, by the way. I mean, Amac had some moments. Bacho had moments at a different point in the season. Jennings was doing his freshman thing, showing potential and maybe coming along, but was not a focal point by any stretch of the imagination. So, and O'Banner obviously is what O'Banner was, but as far as true big men, guys I expected to see doing stuff in the paint, on the block, etc. What is this, 1955? Am I thinking about George Mikan? I don't know. But that O'Banner is not necessarily in that category to me. So sometimes when you think about big men from last year, at least to me, I'm thinking Bacho, I'm thinking Amac, I'm thinking Jennings. And to maintain that type of thing, I wouldn't think would be too high of a standard by any stretch. But you got to get guys in your jersey first to try to do that. We need guys to sign up. And you just wonder, man, how many options beyond, say, these 2 that we're citing here today could be out there if you don't find success here. And if I'm Grant McCasland, to these big guys, talking about getting buckets or having one of these guys being a focal point as a scorer, telling them, boys, don't worry about that right now. You just worry about cleaning that glass, cleaning up trash, getting your buckets that way. Because you see this dude out here, his name is Pop Isaacs. This is our bucket getter, okay? First and foremost, this is the bucket getter. He's going to not make every shot. That's when your buckets come in, okay? He's going to miss one here or there. That's when your buckets come in. I'd love to be wrong, by the way, and you have some guy just kind of take over from a scoring standpoint there in the front court. But I'm looking for guys that can come in and be physical, know how to use their elbows, and understand defensively is where we are orienting our program. When you just think about a San Diego State transfer, given what they were on that end of the floor last year, I get kind of excited about that possibility. But either way, Chris, I don't know if if you have some concept of what I guess the culture was once rooted in, that being defense, can we just immediately apply that same type of concept to a Grant McCasland defense? I don't want to go too fast and just saying, well, what that looked like is what this is going to look like. So I want to get into next week a little bit more so some thoughts from Grant McCasland on how he came to kind of form his defensive foundation. And there probably will be some differences, obviously, in what you did successfully defensively under Chris Beard and Mark Adams, and hopefully what you will do under Grant McCasland. But the similarity that will have to be there, some disruptors in the paint, right? Those guys had that. Chris Beard and Mark Adams both. And regardless of what, I guess, details might change, you've got to have that kind of presence. So I hope you're able to find some success here with some of these. And by the way, Kendall Weaver, yeah, best of luck, bud. Anybody that is spelling a name Chendall and calling that Kendall, it's Chendall, unless you're from Slovakia. So I don't think you belonged here anyway. Best of luck in Austin with the rest of the hipsters who are using 4 letters to make one sound, typically represented by one letter. Kendall, Chendall. I don't know if I knew it was Kendall until you just said it. I got to be honest with you, Chris. I've been calling him Chendall this entire time, which is just kind of fun to say. Hey, coming up next, I know as we're scatter shooting on a basketball front there a little bit, we are scatter shooting far and wide, all across the bow. We're back in that Red Raider junk drawer on the other side. We're going to be talking about a few different things. Big 12 game presentation, wired up coaches, XFL flavor, Pac-12, Utah, a wedding, and a crane climb. It's all still out there in the ether, and we're getting to it next on Locked On Texas Tech. But first, today's episode brought to you by Built Bar. And if you're looking for a delicious snack, but you don't want all the sugar, don't want all the calories, I got what you need, buddy. That's Built Bar or Built Puff. What makes them so good? For starters, covered in 100% real dark chocolate. Tastes so great, you're not going to think they're good for you. Unbelievable flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, cookies and cream. Not sure how they do it, but they maintain amazing macros while tasting like a candy bar. What's even better, they're healthy. Only 130 calories and 4 grams of sugar with a whopping 17 grams of protein. And now you don't have to wait to get a box. You can always go to Built.com to get your specialty flavors. But also right now, you can walk into your local Walmart or Sam's Club and pick up a 4-bar box if you're at Walmart. Or if you hit Sam's Club, 13-bar box with hit flavors, brownie batter puff, or the churro puff. You can thank me later after you try your first Built Bar. Thanks for joining us on Locked On Texas Tech. Always great to have you along for the ride on the Locked On Podcast Network. Appreciate you for making us your first listen on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. Subscribe on YouTube if you haven't so far, so you never miss an episode. We have topped 3,000, on to the next hill, 4,000, and would love to be there by a Texas Tech kickoff. So we got a timeline to make that happen as we span the summer. Hope you will continue, if you are, taking that test drive until you're satisfied. You know it's going to work out for your family, and then hop on in. Let's make a deal and subscribe on YouTube to Locked On Texas Tech. Got a few different things to touch on before we are out of here this week, Chris, as we dive into that Red Raider junk drawer, as we like to do here ever so often. I want to start in the Big 12 Conference because this was something that I thought was really interesting, and also something that I have been pining for many, many years now, Chris. I've seen some of my wildest dreams come true. I don't know if they were just tuned in to local radio all those years here in the LBK when I was just shouting into the abyss to expand the playoff, to have on-campus games, to yada, yada, yada. Some of these things coming true, I cannot believe it. Here's one that I've also shouted into the abyss before. Let's get some wired up sound on some of these games. The problem has been, I think you'd only have to broadcast on HBO or something where the language could be a little saltier. And I don't know if we're comfortable with how many racial slurs we might hear within a given game, but I've always been interested in it. Either way, let's ditch the broadcasters, get Gus Johnson out of my face, and let's just wire everybody involved up for sound. That's one of the many things that is being pitched apparently by the Big 12 Conference to enhance game presentation. And you said something off the air that I kind of thought was interesting. You know, XFL flavors, some of the stuff we've seen in that league, I guess could make its way into some of these broadcasts. And it's not just the Big 12. I shouldn't put it specifically at their feet. I think some networks are thinking about this kind of thing anyway, so you may actually see it far and wide in some seasons soon to come.
Yeah, I think Brett Yormark is certainly somebody that is embracing this. I think Fox and ESPN, kind of the two primary, TV partners with the Big 12 of kind of, and I think a lot of this does. It has to do with, look, the USFL and XFL were trying to differentiate. What can we do to make our product more interesting? And I think you try to take people behind the scenes. You try to take them inside the game, and that's a bit tricky, I think, at times, especially when we're talking college athletics. But I do, I do think
that would be the best show ever, Chris. Just college sports reality show, day to day, behind closed doors.
Absolutely,
best soap opera there's ever been.
But I think they're talking like in-game interviews with players and coaches. I think whether this gets to like wiring up the referees. So you tell because the call in the XFL that went viral was, hey, unsportsmanlike on number 3 for squirting the back judge with the water bottle. That's his first unsportsmanlike penalty of the game. I mean, and it was very real. But you get a lot of the interaction and the discussion. Now, wouldn't that be wild if you kind of could hear how officials talked and like how they came to a decision, and you could, because everybody claims bias and all this and that would be wild. Whereas like I just think the XFL, nobody cares if Birmingham got screwed over Dallas.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, I mean, nobody cares. Locker room access, I don't know if that is, like the pregame stuff or halftime stuff. I just don't know what all this will entail. But I think the in-game interviews, certainly as it relates to players, would be very interesting. But I think they're just trying to figure out ways to keep eyeballs on their product. And what can we do to keep people engaged, and give them more reasons to kind of want to watch these games? And how can we enhance the value if we're Fox or ESPN? So this is certainly something that they have talked about. And I think they're going to, again, I don't know to what extent and when it becomes when it is put in play, but it sounds like that is gonna be something that they do and do soon.
At least give me a simulcast. I don't want clips. I don't want cut-ups. I want wired for sound the entire time. Again, I understand this is a man's game, and it's a game rooted in violence. So some of the language may get a little salty for folks out there every once in a while. HBO, Cinemax, Stars, YouTube, whatever we need to make that feed possible, I'll be dialing it in. I freaking roll my eyes at the in-game interview, however. And the athlete thing would maybe a little bit more interesting. But, Chris, these coaches' interviews that we see like between first and second quarter or whatever, why is the only question I ever have. Because the only time they're entertaining is when the coach rebuffs it so much that it becomes entertaining. Like Greg
Popovich.
Yeah, he's the all-time GOAT in that regard. But I just, like, where did that come from? Who loves it so much that they keep doing it? Is it, like, so sponsorable? I don't know. That was one that I was like, there we go again. We got to hear from the head coach between the first and second for 10 seconds. So the sideline reporter, I guess. And, hey, I don't want to step on any toes here. You do whatever you want to do out there, big man, on that sideline. I'm talking to the best sideline reporter in the country. But the sideline reporter wants to get out there, flash the pearly whites in front of the camera. I'm here with Greg Popovich. Greg, would you like to tell me anything? No, I wouldn't. All right, back to you, John. It's kind of what we get sometimes. But the locker room access, I think post-game, like I love Texas Tech post-game cinematic recaps, right? They do these like videos that are so dramatized. That's why they call them cinematic recaps. They're just awesome, especially, when you're recapping a win. So more of that. I don't know who doesn't like that. I love that stuff. I think you go a long way with really expanding that footprint. And the Wired Up for Sound officiating crew, I am all on board with. That would generate so much drama from week to week. And if you won't give us the post-game press conference, fine. We're just going to listen to you the entire time while you're doing it. That's fine. I'll make that trade if you don't want to talk to us and explain your fist pump in the end zone after the Longhorns score, Mr. Official. I'm okay with that. We'll just hear you, I guess, in the moment saying, hell yeah, hook 'em. Threw up a little in my mouth just saying something like that. All right, Chris, let's keep rummaging through the drawer here because this one's gotten pretty interesting. Big 12, Pac-12 continues to be what the Big 12, Pac-12 story has kind of been. Pac-12 is just searching far and wide for anything to suggest that they can keep up monetarily without USC and UCLA stay with the Big 12 or the ACC. They couldn't do that anyway with USC. So obviously that ship has sailed. That story kind of remains the same as we sit here today. But one thing that's gotten a little bit more interesting is some reporting as it relates to Big 12 targets and who is maybe more of a focus or not. Utah has represented themselves entirely as the pricks of the West, I guess, so far. I didn't know that about them before, but they have identified themselves as that, via some online conversation, things like that, comments from Utah administration. And now we have apparently this week some thoughts being out there that the Big 12 is cooling on Utah or was never as hot on Utah. It's always been kind of interesting because you have BYU there, right? And like, how big is the Utah market anyway? Do you need two? But I'm wondering, is this like a response to Utah just, spitting on the Big 12 every time they get a chance to talk, or is there actually something there? What do you think?
So, this week we had a lot of coverage on realignment, and we had, hey, ESPN is out on the Pac-12. Hey, no, Pac-12 is very much engaged in meeting with Pac-12, and like major, national news guys, I guess, kind of reporting different things and kind of going back and forth on that. So that was kind of fascinating to see. But one of the things that came out of this that is being kind of reported or talked about is you're getting closer to some sort of movement here with as it relates to people getting settled or moving or whatever, because it's just you're about a year away when this is a Pac-12 league that doesn't have a TV deal. There is no deal in place for the 2024 season, and we are a few months away from the 23 season beginning. So they don't know where their next check's coming from. They're in their last year of their contract, right?
And we're running out of jokes, by the way. We've named every station, PBS. I don't even know what to throw in anymore. So we need something to happen.
Yeah, that's right. But one of the things that has kind of come out here that it was unknown to me, and I think this is coming from some Pac-12 folks, I think there's some Big 12 folks that have kind of agreed with it, is that the Big 12, and again, I had this misread too, but the Big 12 definitely has interest in the two Arizona schools. They also have are heavily interested in Colorado. I would have thought, Utah, the Four Corners and all that would have been heavily in play there. You could have owned the state of Utah. Utah's been really good in football. I don't know what Colorado ultimately brings you. I know there's a lot of news out there because of Dion and all those things. I guess you can claim Denver TV market. I don't know. But what we're hearing is that despite Utah's, success football wise recently, and Kyle Whittingham, and then they're playing in multiple Rose Bowls and all those things, the TV folks aren't as high on Utah. And Utah knows this. So Utah isn't real keen on, that's why they've kind of a lot of thought as to why they've been naysaying the Big 12 and we don't want to do that. But they just don't think they're high on their priority list. But I keep reading and hearing that it's because the folks that would say this is a good ad, this ad makes you more valuable here or there, doesn't necessarily include Utah. Again, this is why it's kind of fascinating to follow the reasoning behind some of this stuff. But maybe because you have BYU, you already own, the state of Utah, and it would be like having Texas Tech, Baylor, TCU, Texas, and Oklahoma, and then going, we've got to have SMU. Trying to get the Dallas market. Well, you don't really, you've already got it. So maybe that's the thought. I really don't know. But because I would have thought Utah would have been a travel partner to BYU. And again, it doesn't mean you still won't look to add them, but I think there's a little more background there. So I don't know. Because I think Arizona and Colorado are being rumored now as like two that are listening the most or could be most likely, maybe. I don't know. So we'll see. I think it's very careful. This changes often. There's a lot of hearsay here, and so you just have to be careful. But it's been kind of interesting to read the tea leaves because this week we got a little more chatter and a little more movement.
Yeah, no doubt. Do you even know or have an idea of what number are we chasing? 16, 18, 20? Because SEC Big Ten, they talk about 20. eventually.
Yeah, Calvin, I don't think that you are. I think you are looking at quality additions, and I think if that number gets you to 20 and you feel like it's not watered down, I think that's what you do, because it's survival of the fittest. Really, you're trying to play big picture. I just think of these 4 schools that we've talked about mostly in the Pac-12. They're all no-brainer, like mainstay, long-standing institutions with athletics that matter to them, and I mean all that stuff.
Yes,
and in markets that matter. And I think Oregon and Washington are the same. That's why I think people have paused on the Gonzaga. I think it's not necessarily the no-brainer that the Pac-12 schools would be. I would also say that Washington State and Oregon State are the same. I just don't know if that does enough for you to move any kind of the needle to where even if they wanted to jump. Now, again, if you had to add those to get some of the other ones, probably worth adding, yes. But as standalones or as a duo or whatever, I just think there's probably a pecking order. But I don't know if you're looking for a certain number, no.
Wanted to mention that right here on the Locked On Podcast Network on Locked On Big 12, our guy Josh Neighbors had Andrew Marchand of New York Post. We've mentioned him many times. Marchand and Uran, their sports business podcast. Uran of the Sports Business Journal had an episode with Marchand, I think just yesterday. So it's up right now on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. That's Locked On Big 12. Some interesting stuff there if you are interested in conversations like this. Before we're out of here, Chris, now I think some of you may have forgot about this crane climbing situation. Okay. But your boy, me, I have not. And I'm keeping my ear to the railroad track. And what I've heard, Chris, is that we have a wedding this weekend that could signify some point along the timeline of getting Joey McGuire up that crane. Because when the crane climb challenge became a thing, Coach McGuire's daughter, Reagan, I believe, along with some others, but her prominently, made a plea of paraphrasing along the lines of, at least walk me down the aisle first before you maybe climb this crane. Now I hear the railroad track telling me wedding is this weekend potentially, so that's a big bridge to cross in the effort to climb this crane. We do want to wish blessings to the happy newlyweds, but seriously, can we talk about the crane climb again?
Yeah. So what you have is, there's the giant cranes, and Debbie, was like, hey, he's not doing this until after that wedding. There was kind of like the caveat. I've got like an anti-Tito's vodka, some slander here that I think would be, is fun. So let me give you that in a second, because that wraps into the wedding conversation.
Yeah.
Here. Yeah, exactly. So there's the potential crane climb, but we had to get to this weekend because Joey and Debbie's daughter Reagan, who lives up in New York and is going to marry Joe. Met Joe at the bowl game. I told you about this, Cowan. He's an avid listener to Locked On Texas Tech. Awesome guy. I stood next to him during the Texas Bowl for about a half. We had a great time talking and getting to know him a little bit. And then we're celebrating after the game at the hotel about 2 a.m. After the Texas Bowl victory. So, we have that this weekend. It's taken up a lot of Joe Debbie and Joey's time getting ready for this and all those things. I did find out that the venue that they were going to have the reception at had Tito's on the on the old menu there, and there was the price and all that, just for as far as the beverage choices. And Miss Debbie said, no, we're not doing it. So we now will be serving.
Stand up, Debbie, stand up.
We'll now be serving Kettle One. It's going to cost a bit more. But Debbie informs me, don't care. So, it's going to cost a little bit more across the board. But yeah,
I love that. We should have led with the show with that, Chris. I have a good buddy of mine. I'm not too heavy into that scene anyway, but a good buddy of mine whose wife was, this has been a while since this came about, that what Tito's was giving like Texas $1 billion gazillion or something. Anyway, forced the wife, and she didn't understand it at all. Why do I have to stop buying tea? He took a stand. Debbie McGuire is taking a stand, and you should be taking a stand as well if you're not already. Bravo. It just warms my heart up so much, just like, a pint of vodka should.
Yeah, so good. Yeah, Kettle One for the win.
Let's go.
I'm sure there's other. That's just what the venue was going to serve the McGuire family and everything like that. So I got a kick out of it. We had some fun conversations about that. So anyway, hopefully the wedding goes well. Hopefully, Reagan and Joe live happily ever after and all those things. And I know it's a big stressful time for Joey and his wife, Debbie. So anyway, hopefully everybody has a good weekend as far as that goes. I mean, you mentioned Cinco de Mayo, and I always enjoy this too. Like this weekend, speaking of beverages, the mint juleps, which I'm not really a fan of, but you got the Kentucky Derby this weekend as well, which is kind of, okay, we're getting into early May. I would love to go to the Kentucky Derby someday. It would be quite the scene just to kind of watch America happen. You got people, diving in mud puddles in the infield, and you got people in seersucker suits out there on the outside and everything in between. So,
well, that's what I was going to ask. Is this the porta potty run race?
Not this. This is a little more uppity. I think Belmont and Preakness are kind of that way in the infield. Yeah. So.
Oh man, you're talking to a mint julep man right here. And if you're in the LBK and you want to be a mint julep man, go see my girl Mary downtown at the Narrow Bar. Going to kick out the best.
Very nice. Yeah. Okay. Yes. Shout out to the Narrow Bar. Yeah.
Also a great Ray Charles jam, mint julep, where it takes two to tango. All right. Best of luck to Joe and Reagan. Where's Reagan on the Locked On Texas Tech listenership? I guess she didn't mention anything. It was just Joe.
It was just Joe. Yeah, as far as I knew. Well, yeah, that's all. That's my extent. I didn't talk to Reagan about our podcast here. Yeah,
maybe that'll be one of the things that Joe can put on the Mrs. plate.
Okay. Well, they're gonna live. They live up in New York, in the New York area, and so she does fashion design and all that, and he works for a waste management company, I think, and all that stuff, and does really well. And so they're kind of up there. I don't know if that's their long term future will be, but they want to stay connected with what's going on with dad or father-in-law, as it would be. And so we try to do our best to
thanks for being out there.
Yeah, that's right.
We're huge in New York, and if we're not, Joe will send you a t-shirt to pimp around town and maybe do a little on the ground marketing for us. We'd be glad to have that happen. Congratulations to all involved on that. And yes, it does mean I'm not going to forget, probably the word crane will be mentioned on a show next week. So be back to find out right here on Locked On Texas Tech. Thanks for joining us each and every day on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. And again, don't forget, now available on the Sirius XM app, SXM in the App Store. Chris, appreciate the time as always, man. Enjoyed it. Hope you have a great weekend.
You too, man. Enjoy the weekend. Hopefully wedding goes well. Hopefully Cinco de Mayo goes well for you, Cowan. I hope your horse wins in the Derby. If you're out there and you're watching all that, we'll talk to you next week. Keep hope alive, people.
I'm probably more Elaine Bennis as far as a horse race goes. How'd my horse do? He was shot.
Glue factory.
We'll end on that. For Chris Level, I'm Casey Cowan. We'll see you on Monday on Locked On Texas Tech.